Now a word from this week's sponsor, Onshape. Onshape is the only cloud-native product development platform featuring professional-grade CAD and data management. With Onshape, you no longer need an expensive workstation. All of the heavy lifting is done in the cloud. Things like rendering and creating large assemblies can be done on inexpensive devices. Onshape is a professional tool like SolidWorks. It was actually created by the same founders as SolidWorks. I have used Onshape and it feels just like SolidWorks with all the same commands. So if you're a current SolidWorks user, it's a very easy transition. I highly recommend all the engineers and product developers listening to consider Onshape for their business. You can try it for free at onshape.pro/engineering entrepreneur podcast or click the link in the description.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Engineering Entrepreneur Podcast, episode 128. As always, this is your host, Scott Tarsi, and I run CADdesignhelp.com. Please go to my website, sign up for the email list, and we will send you a free PDF of the top 4 mistakes inventors make when you do that. And we have some other exciting news. I've got a webinar. Well, by the time the show comes out, it'll be over. It's going to be tomorrow at February 24th at 4:30 Eastern, but I'll probably do more in the future after this, but I'll do a webinar on how to monetize your invention idea. And assuming I remember how to record it, I will be putting a link up to my email list. So again, that's another good reason to sign up for the email list. You'll get all that kind of stuff. And just send me a review on iTunes if you can. If you have any feedback, email me info@CADdesignhelp.com. So let's move on to our guest this week, and his name is Eli. Eli Packouz, is that right? Did I say that right? Last name?
Eli Packouz, but I don't expect anybody to get it right. It's not
Eli, not Eli. Okay,
at all like it's spelled.
All right, cool. And so he is actually an inventor of the Instafloss product, which is the world's first 10-second floss. And we will get into that in a minute. But Eli, let's go over your background first and kind of like learn who you are, and then that will give us probably some information on the standard inventor questions, like how did you come up with the idea and the prototyping and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So Instafloss is not my first product, and in fact this isn't even my first company. I founded Singular Sound with my brother back in 2013, at least formally. We actually were starting before then. And it started with my brother, who is a musician, and he had ideas for pedals that could help musicians, help them do a lot of things hands-free, so for guitars. So the first idea was a drum machine and a guitar pedal, so you can control a beat track while you're playing guitar. So essentially queuing up MIDI files. We knew, based off everyone that we were talking to, that this was going to be insanely popular amongst musicians, and we had to pursue it. So we started prototyping. We got something that worked. And long story short, we did crowdfunding. That's how we got our initial sum of money. We went into manufacturing. We made many, many, many mistakes along the way, and we founded a company, and we came out with 8 more products in that company. And 5 years ago, I had the idea for Instafloss, and I knew that it was just going to be the biggest thing ever to pursue, because everybody has teeth. Nobody wants to floss, but everybody has to. And so if we could make something that could do it automatically, I knew that even though it was going really well at the previous company and I was excited to work on a lot more projects, the Instafloss was just really calling to me. So eventually I resigned my duties at Singular Sound. I pursued Instafloss full time. It's been 5 years. I don't regret it at all. And we're right there. We have a working device, and we're starting to do the manufacturing run right now.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So the Singular Sound, did you sell that company then? You don't work there anymore?
No, so I'm no longer in the day-to-day operations because Instafloss really takes up 200% of my time. And so it would not be fair to the people in either of the companies to divide up my time like that. So Singular Sound is still up and running. They're still coming out with new stuff. I actually still talk to most of the people still there, and they're doing great things. And I do weigh in occasionally. I do some board meetings and things, and I talk about, product directions, but I'm just not dealing with the day-to-day grind because Instafloss has enough details to keep me busy.
Very cool. I want to talk more about Instafloss. I did have some questions that your assistant who set up the podcast had. It's one of them here. I found interesting. You were raised in an extremely religious household, and that led you to inventing. I'm curious on that.
Oh, well, I was not aware that was actually. It's not aware.
If you don't want to talk, you don't want to talk about that.
No. I'm happy.
I thought that was an interesting question, and I wanted to just understand like what that means or like how that's related before moving into like more Instafloss specific.
Sure, absolutely. Look, I'm happy to talk about it. I just did not know that. Honestly, maybe I should look at my profile because I have not even seen what they put in there. But yeah, no, I'm happy to talk about it. So, the phrase that necessity is the mother of invention. So
right.
In my case, I kind of feel like mother is a necessity of invention. So I grew up in an extremely religious household. And I would say, the questions probably started when you're like 5 years old of like, why do I have to wake up so early for worship? Why would a God care who's omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolence, give a damn if, I woke up this early? So that's probably the first question, and you're groggy. It's in the morning. It's like, hey, what the hell's going on? Questions lead to more questions. And luckily for me, my parents came from a tradition where they truly believed that the faith was insufficient and that you had to know there was a God, and there are certain verses that suggest this. And therefore, in the process of knowing there is a God, there is this sort of inquiry. At least, according to them, there's plenty of faiths and religions that have strikingly different opinions on the matter. Anyway, so as I were to get progressively older, I would debate about various fundamental theological questions. And they would say, you know what, I don't have the answer for you, but let me present to you a book, that has the answers. They would give me the books, I would read the books, and I would say, well, I have all these counter arguments. And they say, well, let's call up the authors of the books. And so I would actually, luckily, I don't know, these people actually take Zoom calls. Well, it wasn't Zoom back then, but it was calls. And, I would argue with them. And then, I mean, to my perspective, I thought, pretty decisively. And so then they would sort of keep putting me up to higher and higher peoples on the apologetics totem pole, apologetics being the art of responding to skepticism in regards to a religion. And I found myself needing to do more and more research when it came to various topics, because when people not all, some certain arguments for gods or religions is like fundamentally isolated, non-empirical, just purely logical, like we know because how could something have come from nothing type of arguments. But other types of arguments are empirical arguments, being like it says in Genesis that plants were created before the sun. I would say, well, we understand from, the field of astronomy that the sun actually is much older than plants, as well as, the archaeology of biology. So, plants.
Right. Well, plants can't survive without sunlight. So it's kind of,
so
like all these other arguments are made. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's actually two elements to that. One is the logical. It'd be impossible for plants to exist without the sun. Or like, oh, well, anything can be possible when you have a God doing miracles, and maybe there was just miraculous sunlight. But then there's also the sort of empirical, like, no, for real. We see where in which the oldest plant layers are, and how old plants are, and how old elements in our earth come from, etc. So anyway, I had to start investigating. And this led to an extreme curiosity of just how do things work? How do you know that you can rely on carbon dating? How do you know that fossils are legit? How do you know if there was a flood at one point? How do you assess whether a historical document was written 5,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago or yesterday? So all of these things led to an extreme interest in how things work. And I really started digging under those. And I really credit that to the start of an extreme curiosity. And, you could say engineering, which is you first start with the curiosity of how does it work, and then you start taking it apart and seeing how it works yourself. Engineering is taking that curiosity to a hands-on level. So yeah, honestly, I did not expect to go down that route, but I'm happy to talk about it. I did not know that was the question up there.
No, that's cool. That's it's a really interesting like background there in terms of like how you came to be such an inventor. And so, so I guess was your very first, well, you probably worked on some stuff before Singular Sound, I'm assuming, right? There's like probably some failures like before you did that, or was that like really your first true like thing that you tried to make?
Well, it depends on what you mean by like true. So, I mean, I've definitely had a lot of failures within Singular Sound and even before Singular Sound for sure. So I actually started off I started off with actually an online business, not even inventing. So my parents told me like, hey, we're not going to pay for your college. So if you want to go to a secular institution like that, you're going to have to pay your own way. And I'm like, fine, I will. So I started off by purchasing SD cards on like a Black Friday sale and then selling them on eBay at the time and selling them at full price, a couple weeks later, and using that money to buy like a larger bulk from China and then scaling it and scaling and scaling. And that's how I was able to pay for college. And it was honestly when my brother had the idea for the Beat Buddy was when I first got into actually saying like, okay, let's create a new product rather than just selling other people's products for slight margins.
Okay, I didn't know that it's like a viable business model. It's like, but it makes sense. Yeah, buy low, sell high. So if you can find deals on these SD cards or any like sort of like a commodity product like that, where it's not like one SD card is like the same as another, and what's good about those is like it's low cost to ship, low risk of like damage. So it's easy to like we won't have a lot of customer returns, and it's not like a product like that people are going to return very often. Like the only reason they would return is if it doesn't work. So
right,
that's pretty interesting. And that's a good way that's a creative way to like pay for your college versus just working fast food job and making minimum wage or something. Like this is way better because you can scale it and you're not trading time for dollars.
And in addition, it was something I was able to continue throughout college because I could, the product is really small. So I was able to keep it in my dorm room and continue funding college.
Yeah. And it probably didn't, once you got the hang of things, it probably didn't take up a lot of your time, really.
No, honestly, packing stuff was the most time-consuming part, and I was able to hire out people who.
Yeah, I'm sure you could probably hire an intern or hire your buddy from down the hall in your dorm room or whatever. Like, hey, you want to make some money here? Pack these things up.
Exactly that, and exactly. You see the wisdom in it.
However, absolutely, I do. Yeah.
If you invent your own products, you get to keep much larger margins than if you're selling essentially a commodity.
Right, for sure. I mean, eventually China, because it's always China, will rip you off, but you have a leeway there and you have a brand and stuff. So even if they copy your thing, you can probably still sell for more than they can sell it for, still get some sales. So
I mean, so if you're patented, I mean, so if you invent without a patent, then certainly not only China, everybody's going to rip you off. You're essentially doing the R&D work for other corporations. But if you have a defensible granted utility patent, and especially if you have it in the relevant jurisdiction, so for example, if you have a Chinese patent and you have an American patent, and then wherever else you may be selling, and you're willing to defend your patent, so obviously this is like a long series of ifs, but if you have all the ducks in a row, then you really do have a defensible turf.
Yeah, the question is, are you stand to lose enough to justify, the $1 million expense of defending your patent? Because that's the reality. But that's a conversation for another day. Let's focus on Instafloss. I think that should be our main focus on the call here. So, we talked about the first product, and then I guess tell us. We'll start at the problem. Okay. So yeah, we know about flossing. Typically the dentist says you should floss for 5 minutes or some more, which feels like an eternity when you're in there flossing. Mm-hmm. So I think everyone can relate to the issue of trying to floss faster. I guess, like, why did you choose this as something to pursue?
So I suppose there's two questions. There's two ways I can interpret your question. Is why did I choose to pursue this? And why did I choose to pursue this? Meaning, how did I come up with this specific design versus when I had a design, why did I actually choose to invest time and money and like my life into this?
Yeah.
So which one of those two are you asking?
Oh, we'll go with the first one. I thought you were saying like you were going to explain both. So.
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to explain both. So I think the why choose to pursue it in terms of why choose to you already have a company that's working. You're already coming out with stuff. You already have everything set up, and you're making music tech equipment. Why go into a completely different field? And for me, I have an invention journal. I have way more products than I can ever come out with. I think of another one like every other week, and 90% of them are garbage. But the best way to have a good idea is just to have a lot of ideas. So just have your garbage ideas, and I give them a ranking. And the ranking is a 5x5 system. Essentially, the first number is what is the applicability? How many people are actually going to be influenced by this? You can call it the market. And the second number is how feasible. So something that would be, where one being not at all, one being lowest and 5 being highest. So a 5x5 would be applicable to everybody, but really difficult, perhaps not feasible at all. So a great example of that would be, some idea for nuclear fusion. If you could come up with that, you will change everybody in the world's life. But you may pursue the next 30 years trying to get that right and not. So a lot of ideas, they sometimes they're easy enough to do, but they don't really help anybody, or they help a good number of people, but they seem really difficult to get off the ground. Am I going to spend the next 15 years trying to perfect a design on something that, is only going to help a very niche audience? So these are the sort of things you have to balance, because you can't pursue all your ideas. It's just, you just don't have
So you decide, okay, so you make I was wondering if you were going to consult other people on these products. Well, I guess then you would need NDAs because you don't want to tell too many people, but it's like, I always try to use the market to tell me what the market wants, not myself, right? Like, because I might think, oh, this is, and honestly, I don't think like most people. I'm a little, I guess I think weird, because like, every time I think something's a good idea, it like never works. And then I'll see all these other products that I think are stupid, and then everybody wants it. And I'm like, well, I clearly don't think like the average person, at least not in America, because for all these reasons. And same with like social media. Like I think social media people watch, I'm like, this is like the dumbest thing I've ever watched. And then I'll go watch another video and there's like 50 views, and like, well, I thought that was interesting.
Well, You're a data sample of one, So yeah, I certainly I did research. Intuitively I'm like, oh yeah, I think everybody needs this. But part of the process for giving Instafloss a number of how applicable it is to everyone is doing the digging. So, I found out that 70% of Americans regularly skip flossing. And the reason they do that is because it takes too long. And Americans have some of the best dental hygiene in the world. And 70% of them are skipping flossing because it takes too long. So it's clearly there is people who have a problem. Now, how do I know that this solution would work? And this is sort of jumping the gun in how I came to the design of Instafloss. But and we'll circle back to this, but I had the idea essentially uses water jets instead of string for a number of reasons, which we can get into in a second. But I was like, okay, well, what is the market for using water jets? And I started digging, and I found out that $1.2 billion worth of water flossers are sold every year. However, they take even longer than string. So they take the number one complaint about flossing, that it takes too long, and they take even longer. So if they make the number one complaint worse and they sell $1.2 billion a year, if we completely solve the number one complaint about flossing and can get it done automatically in 10 seconds, what could we do? And so, you for sure, you can't just listen to your own intuition of would I use this product, but would everybody else use the product? And from every bit of research I was doing and was approaching it from as many various angles as I could, of what is the problem, what is the market, what are people spending on something similarly, what would they spend, what would they switch to, what would fit into their lives.
So did you get all of your data from just research, or did you actually get people together or ask people? I'm curious on how you acquired the data.
So both. I would say that the data that I was super confident in is the research, right? The market size and stuff like this, because it uses large representative numbers. The issue with asking people is that your social network may be different from the broader market. There could be a market in Europe and not in the United States. There could be a market in Japan, and you don't know. And the people you talk to are perhaps limited. That being said, you definitely want to talk to people to see if you're missing anything and just to be able to gauge an emotional reaction. And so everybody I talk to, when I'm like, hey, would you buy a product that could floss your teeth automatically, they would immediately be like, what? You have this? I need it now. Shut up and take my money, meme, essentially. So, that's very positive feedback. Not sufficient because, you could just have weird friends. But certainly.
Yeah. And, everything I've always read about market testing is that you can't ask your friends and family, hey, would you buy this thing? First of all, it's a hypothetical. So they're just going to, they're not legally obligated to buy it if you finally come up with it. So they're just going to say yes to make you happy. And it could be a terrible idea. And they could say, you really need strangers and you really need them to put down their credit card. For example, what I've done in the past in some products is I made a 3D rendering of it or whatever, made a prototype, took pictures and built a landing page, right? And put a credit card information in there, and they would go to buy it, and I had a message, oh, we're out of stock, but we got your email address now, so we'll let you know. The whole point was they thought they were buying it, right? It was a true test from random people if they were going to buy it or not, right? And so that's kind of my go, no-go decision to therefore actually develop this product. My last guest on the show who did the pool cleaner, very similar. He was going to the people's houses, and he was actually taking money from them to install this pool cleaner, which was just a decoy. They were actually physically cleaning it themselves, but they wanted to see if people were willing to pay for an automated service. So the customer thought it was actually doing it. They refund the money later, but the whole point was this was the market validation. So I'm kind of curious, is that what you were doing, or were you doing it more I guess to me, it's riskier to do it if you're just asking your friends and family, because again, right. I don't know if it's true data.
So I got data more pertinent to what you were saying later. The first data set that I had that was seemingly completely sufficient to me was that people were spending collectively $1.2 billion a year on water flossers that took even longer than string. So it seemed, self-evident, just obvious that they would spend at least that amount of money on water flossers that were quicker than string, because essentially the same product. If people are buying something and they're spending money, it's not like it's a completely, it's not like we invented flossing, right? And no one's flossing. You're like, would you do this completely novel thing? If you were to, I don't know, if you were to have a washing machine that could get it done in a tenth of the time, as long as all other variables were the same, you could presume that people would buy it. Now, obviously,
and price is important too, because
price is one of the variables. Yeah, price is
because if your flossing thing is 100 times more expensive, then no, people, it's like the pain point isn't that high. Like there's always that. There's always that line of where you've gone too far with the price. It's like, if it's better, people would be willing to spend some amount more, but not an infinite amount more.
Right. Although at this stage, I did not know what the price was going to be. So I couldn't ask that, or if I did, I'd maybe get like a range of information. But I did get that information later, in the sense of something very, very similar to your fake checkout. I didn't go as realistic as what you did, but when you were to go to get it, there would be an email sign up. And, there's a very, there's a ratio of email signups to purchases that typically you see across enough data. And so from there, I was able
I think it's typically like 0.1% of people on an email list will buy or something. I'm taking some marketing courses, and like, that's typically like, it's like 1 out of 1,000. Typically,
yeah.
Like,
So then,
and
there's
a email will buy. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a range, and you can be conservative, but it's like, okay, we mentioned all these details and these amounts of people are signing up. And the reason why I did the sign up instead of the fake checkout was because one of the early ways I wanted to get funding for the development and to bring it to market was a crowdfunding campaign, and therefore we needed emails in order to get there.
Right, exactly. And I would like to touch about crowdfunding next. Well, one of the questions I had on my list here for you was is how to know if a product is a good fit for crowdfunding. And so, I guess related to crowdfunding, yes, a lot of people think, I can just throw my crappy sketch or whatever, my product on Kickstarter and get like $1 million. It's like, no, like zero chance of that. Even if you have like awesome renderings, there's zero chance. Like, you need to have 1,000 people or whatever, some number built up before you even go there, because the whole point of the algorithm is like, it's going to push all the popular things to the top. Well, all the popular things get popular because, whoever's running the company, like we'll just use you, for example, already have that, at least somewhat of a following, right? So you go, let's say you have 10,000 people on the email list or whatever, and you say, hey, we're launching, what's the February 23rd? We're launching February 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern, okay? Well, yes, not everyone's going to do it instantly, but, Kickstarter is going to give you a little bit of time. And it's like, if 5,000 people go back this thing in the first, like, half a day or a few hours or whatever, which is plausible if you've got a big email list, it's going to get pushed to the top. And then it's just like throwing gas on a fire, where it's like, people are seeing it, they didn't know anything about it, they hadn't even heard of you yet, but it's pushed to the top of the list, or close enough to where now it's like going to keep generating, and it kind of spirals out of control in a good way. But if you don't have that initial thing, you go the other way. You go to the bottom and nobody sees it, and the only people who really are going to buy it in the first place, or the only people who are going to buy it, is anybody that you brought in advance. Like, very few people are going to scroll to the very bottom of Kickstarter. It would take so long to find projects down that far. Am I on the right page here? This is conjecture.
You are 100% correct. It is a feedback loop. Success is a feedback loop, and failure.
Yes, there. Yeah.
And so we knew that because it wasn't even my first crowdfunding campaign, so we knew that how important a day one launch was. And so we collected emails for over 6 months before the campaign. And one of the things we actually did is, because there's two things that happen. One is emails tend to go stale. People lose interest, or they change their emails and so on. They forget to update stuff they're actually interested in. And the second thing is, the Google has a promotions tab, as in Gmail, I should say, has a promotions tab, as you're probably well aware of, and that is
Yeah.
death of email marketing. If you're in the promotions tab, maybe a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of people are going to see that.
Is there any tricks? Well, it's funny you say that real quick. I want to interject. So my Gmail is always like maxed out, and I'm like, it's really annoying that you can't hit select all and delete everything. It just doesn't work. At least not at my point where I have like literally 190,000 emails in there. Like it won't work. It'll just freeze up. So I go to the promotions tab because it's 90% junk, at least to me. Mm-hmm. And I just click click at the top, delete 100, and I just do it like 15 times until I, clear up 1% of space again. But yeah, is there any tricks you can do to not have your email go to that tab? Like that would be the trick. But I think Google recognizes a mailing list, and there's probably no way to get out of it.
So that's actually not true. So a
little trick here we're going to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So pay attention. So we would send out a very personal, non-corporate, plain text email after people were to sign up, signed by me, saying, like, I thank you for signing up. This is like a very grassroots project. I want to know, what don't you like about flossing, and what could I do to make it better, because this project is still in the works. Here's like some pictures of my latest prototype. And people would respond, and they would say, oh, I don't like the way it looks, or, oh, can you make it smaller? Or I just hate the bleeding. Can you stop the bleeding? I hate the pain. I have a dental bridge. I have braces. I have sores. I have occlusions in my mouth. I have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. People spill out their hearts. And at first it was me, and then eventually I couldn't. I hired someone, but the rule.
Oh, I thought you did. You didn't just do like an autoresponder, like where once they sign up on the list, it just automatically sends them an email.
Well. So the first thing is an auto message. The first thing is an auto message saying like, "Hey, thank you for signing up. What do you like? What do you not like about flossing, and what do you think about the prototype?" Right. I have some questions for them, some very specific questions in a very corporate, non-automated way. And then they respond, and the responses are real responses, right? Because
but your email actually is an automated email. It's just, you just structured it in a way that didn't look that way.
The first one, yes. The second, all follow-ups are non-automated. The very first one.
Okay. Yeah. But it's probably not too bad to deal with the follow-ups, because only like 1% or probably 0.5% will even respond anyway. It's the questions. So it's like, you don't have, like, you send out 1,000, it's like just a couple you got to respond to.
Right. So I don't remember the exact percentage. I think it was actually higher than that, but I don't recall the exact number. So I don't want to say, but yeah, people would respond. And the policy that I had was that you never let an email go unanswered. If they respond to you, you respond to them. If they respond to the response, you respond to the response to the response, and so on. This does two things. One, as we've been talking about the entire time, Google stops categorizing this email address as promotions, because promotions don't engage in conversations with people. So if you're engaging,
but it won't do it. But it probably takes a few. It doesn't happen just once. You can't just do it once. You probably got to do it 3 or 4 times.
It's not like you do this. It's not like you do this once and you're out. No, of course not. It's a consistent policy of responding to everybody who writes in, and doing as much as we can to get people to write in. So, for example, not only do we have the automated thank you for signing up, what do you hate about flossing, and what do you think of the prototype, but we'd write blogs, try to do it at least once a month, more than that if possible, where there's updates that have that are designed to elicit a response from people. So it's not just updates like, oh yeah, we're continuing, but it's like, oh man, I can't figure this out. What do you think? Or, hey, we think that this might not be important, or there's a feature that I want to build, but it's kind of expensive. Would you pay extra for this? Please let me know. So some super engaging things like that, and then people would write in, even if they didn't write into the first one, they would write in and being like, "Oh, well, I think that's a really useful feature. I would pay extra. I don't care how much it costs." Other people like, "No, no, no, cost is important to me." Honestly, it doesn't matter so much as long as they're writing in, and then you respond to them, and they respond to you. You respond to them. So it's all a numbers game. I don't know what percentage of emails you have to respond to or need to be conversation
Right.
on the promotions tab.
Well,
Google is not transparent.
important thing is like the email address to reply from is the same, right? Because a lot of these like automated emails are like, I don't know, like Etsy.com, no reply at Etsy.com. Well,
Right,
even if
right.
you use that as your personal email address, like you need to be consistent. So you probably need to make it like Eli at whatever, Instafloss.com or whatever, and be the autoresponder and you got to have it come from the same one for Google to know that it's all the same.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. People would get a blog update, etc., directly from me. So that does two things. The first thing is we've talked about, we cross some hidden variable threshold where we're out of the promotions tab. The second thing that it does is we develop relationships with a small percentage, but a percentage nonetheless of our audience. And this makes them feel very engaged, feel like they're part of it, feel like they know about us, and they become evangelists online. And so if we do say an ad and we're trying to get more emails via the ad, and these people on Facebook, they will start commenting on the ads. And we start noticing a lot of the same people that we were talking to being like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited. I talked to the company and they took my idea." And people are going,
right, exactly. Because people think like they're like part of the company now, like, because they talked to you and, got a reply and everything like that. I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So because of this, in part, obviously there's other variables, but this is a large variable. When we gave our email blast for our crowdfunding campaign, we had a very large percentage, far above industry averages, of people who opened it, clicked on it, went to the page, and contributed on day one. So we were able to have a very successful day one, in part due to that engagement strategy. Because people
it's genius. I love it. It's genius. It's genius. I love it. Getting a lot of good ideas out of this. If I ever want to do a crowdfunding campaign, I know exactly what I'm going to do now.
Well, it's part, there's many other elements to it that I didn't talk about, like marketing in general. But the thing is, everybody talks about running Facebook ads, running digital ads, doing all these things to make your site, increase the clicks on your site, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then they just trip on the finish line when it comes to the emails you actually send out. And so I just thought it was more valuable to talk about that because very few people do talk about that.
Okay, so the key takeaway about the emails is that they need to be really engaging. Like you need to ask questions basically that the audience really wants to reply to or will likely reply to.
Yeah, I mean, a question is probably a great way to go about it, but it's that typical thing where, you just need to get them to engage somehow, whether it's by saying something that they feel obligated to respond to, whether it's by asking a question, who knows, just get them to engage. And that's true across all platforms. But anyway, now we're getting into marketing and not inventing and engineering. But we could go on in this.
Well, yeah, and I want to get into, because I'm an engineer, so I want to get into the engineering. But as a guy who runs his own business, and I'm trying to create an e-commerce store. Well, I have an e-commerce store, but I'm trying to expand it, basically get it off of Etsy and get it onto my own site. So I'm paying all these fees and trying to build my email list. Like, I'm learning a lot of this stuff that I didn't go to college for. Like I didn't get any formal training. And so it's like, I like to have that conversation. And I think it's a very big important part of inventing and monetizing your invention, because unless you're super rich, most people want to invent something to make money.
Right.
It's an important thing. But yeah, we should move on, I think, now.
One thing I'll say real quick though, before we move on, because you just mentioned a slight little throwaway comments, but I actually do want to comment on. You said you didn't go to college for this. So I've hired quite a few marketers in my previous company and then a few for Instafloss. Not one has a marketing degree. Every person with a marketing degree that I've ever interviewed has always given me very outdated information. So I think,
well, yeah, they're not. It's because it's digital marketing now. They probably learned how to like send mailers or something like from 1985. Like that's what the textbooks are teaching, right? It's not not how the world works anymore in terms of marketing. It's all digital marketing now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that they have updated the textbooks to something, but the thing is, marketing strategies are outdated every 6 months because algorithms keep on changing. All your SEO strategies, all your clicking strategies, all these things are going to change every 6 months. It is impossible, even if you have 100% up-to-date information in college, to have, by the time you get to your interview, to have up-to-date information. I have found much, much better results hiring people who are mathematically competent, who have an experimental mind. They view it all as data. The best marketer I've ever hired, who now works with me at Instafloss, is Anthony Sastre. And during the interview, I asked him, what would be better, like this or that? And I don't remember the exact question, but I remember how he responded. He said, "I have no idea. I really don't know, but I could tell you how we could find out." And then he went and he designed some sort of experiment, and he's like, "So this will probably tell us the answer, but to be honest, I have no idea what the consumer wants." And I was like,
yeah, no, that's exactly right. Because one of the new things I'm doing is selling some T-shirts and different T-shirt ideas. And it's like, if you want to sell T-shirts, it doesn't matter what product, but let's just use T-shirts. You got an idea for a T-shirt, you think, "Oh, this is great. I love this. People are going to laugh, whatever." It's like, maybe, but you have no data to support it other than your own opinion, which matters almost nothing. And so, going to Amazon and looking what actually is selling, and then, using that as a template for your own T-shirt, like, it's a much better idea than just coming up with something like off the top of your head. Because again, you have no data, like just that guy's point, like you have to experiment to find out. You really don't know until you do it. And that's obviously why you said low ad. Yeah.
I will throw out like one little like caveat to that, is that if you find out what is working, you are, like, almost by definition finding a red ocean rather than a blue ocean. So it might be very difficult. So are you familiar with red ocean versus blue ocean strategies?
No. What does that mean?
So I don't know who made this up, but red ocean is there's a lot of blood in the water, and blue ocean means there's no blood in the water. So essentially, if there's a bunch of fish, if you're a shark and you want to eat, if you see a whole bunch of blood, there's a bunch of fish. The disadvantage is there's a bunch of blood, so there's a bunch of sharks already eating the fish. So maybe you won't be able to get as many fish over there, but for sure that there's fish. On the other hand, the blue ocean, you don't know if there's fish, but if there are fish, you get them all to yourself. So with going on Amazon and saying like, "Oh, this is selling and everybody is selling this," you're like, yes, this product sells, but there's 100 people selling it. I think the real trick, especially as an innovator, especially as an inventor, is to be able to find, well, what aren't they selling that somehow I know will sell? And that's really tricky because you don't, by definition, have data on whether or not something will sell if it's not selling. So like, for example, with Instafloss again, the part of the data was to show me that there was the demand there, was piecing together different pieces of information. One was people are spending $1.2 billion a year on water flossers. The second piece of information was that water flossers take even longer than string. And the third piece of information is that so many people skip flossing because it takes too long. So if you piece that together, you have a good notion. It's by no means proof, obviously, but you have a pretty good idea that there is a demand that is unmet.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And so yeah, let's stop at the marketing part and let's get into the engineering side. So you want to build this, and I think we talked about how you wanted to use a water flosser because of the well, maybe I don't know if you actually answered that question of why that was better than using string.
Right. Actually, we have not gotten into the engineering bits at all. So the first question is what are you going to use to do the physical
right.
act of flossing?
And it could be, and maybe there's even maybe you could use UV, or there's some other way to floss that no one's ever thought of before. Like if you're inventing, you should not restrict yourself and say, well, we have to use string or I have to use water. Like, why can't there be a third way to do it? So did you consider all those? Did you consider both, string, water, and maybe even a third option?
So yes, so I considered string, I considered water, I considered air, I also considered various chemicals. However, I wanted to piggyback on the available scientific data because one thing I didn't want to do was spend a ton of money building a prototype and then do the science and find out it doesn't actually do anything for your oral health.
Oh,
So,
right.
so I wanted to make sure that if we're going to floss you automatically in 10 seconds, it actually is improving your health. I mean, you could floss in 0 seconds if you don't care about the effectiveness by just not flossing. So to me, for something to floss you, it has to floss you properly. So I started digging into the published science on various flossing mechanisms. Air is 100% garbage. Not 100%, it's 99% garbage. There's things out there. They do a very, very minimal thing, right? It's perhaps better than nothing, but just barely. String works. It works well. But water, there's 50 years of scientific data to back this up. Water can remove more plaque than string. Water can get deeper underneath the gum line than string because water molecules are smaller than string, so they can get deeper. Water can reach places string cannot, not only deeper, but also a full 360 degrees around the tooth. So if you imagine your tooth, there's gums, a full 360 around it. Flossing gets in between the teeth and underneath the gum line in between the tooth, but the part of your gums in the front and the back of the tooth, string doesn't really reach there. It'd be very difficult to do it, and 99% of people, even if they could, are not. So water cleans 360 degrees around the tooth, deeper, more plaque, and there's a lot of studies that have shown it reduces bleeding more, reduces gingivitis more, reduces inflammation more, periodontal pockets, which is essentially how much space there is between your tooth and your gum to measure of inflammation. So after reading this, there has been, I knew that water was the way to go. Now, by the way, if you go on the internet, you find all sorts of crazy opinions, and this is like completely tangential. It's not really on the aspect of engineering, but kind of the aspect of really needing to dig into the science. So I believe I've read every single study that has been published in the last 50 years on water flossing in particular, and I've read a good chunk of things on flossing science in general. However, I kept getting people, even dentists sometimes, saying, oh, water flossing is not as good as string. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I've read like 50 years worth of studies. Show me your source. And they would send me a WebMD article. Even doctors would send me a WebMD article, right? And I'm like, okay, well, where's WebMD getting this from? And there's a link, a footnote in WebMD that's quoting the Mayo Clinic. I'm like, okay, well, where's the Mayo Clinic getting this from? Because I would feel like if there was studies showing that string floss was superior to water flossing, I would have seen them. So I'm like, okay, where's the Mayo Clinic getting this from? Maybe I missed something. And so the Mayo Clinic has an article written by a dentist, and he says that, string is so much better than water flossing. And I go to the bottom of the article, and there's 4 citations. The first citation goes to a study on mouthwash that has nothing to do with flossing. The second 2 studies in the citations are studies that actually show water flossing is more effective than string. And the fourth citation is the article he just wrote.
How could they get it wrong? How could they get it wrong completely backwards? It doesn't make
I was
sense.
flabbergasted. So
You are the only person in history to do all that work, to dig that deep and discover the error. It's just people take things just because it is a lot of work. And like, I don't want to say people are lazy, but it's like most people are just going to be like, hey, it's written on WebMD, reputable site, we're going to go with it. And it's like, you were like, oh, I mean, and it's probably accurate 99% of the time, but you found the 1%, mostly because you've done so much other research and this totally contradicted what you've seen. And so it probably got you curious. And then there you went down that rabbit hole.
Right. So, I mean, the thing is, at first, I probably would have shared your sentiment that maybe it's accurate 99% of the time, and I found the 1%. But the truth is, I'm an expert on very few things. And the one thing that I've been doing research on, 100% of it has been wrong on WebMD. So all these things that I'm not, that I have not spent all these years researching, I don't know, articles about who knows, cancer or whatnot. I don't know anything about cancer, right? So therefore I'm not the person who's like, oh, well, I've read all the studies on this type of cancer treatment in the last 50 years, and therefore I would not catch that, right? I wouldn't know to look. I wouldn't know to be suspicious. So, it makes me very concerned. But the point is, I mean, you can't, I would say do your research, but it's impossible. You can't spend 5 years digging into every study on every topic, right? I mean, I was only able to do this on flossing and water flossing in particular because I was developing a product, So I'm not really sure what the takeaway is here, but the point is I eventually wrote to the Mayo Clinic, backed up not just for myself, but with various dental colleagues that I'm working with. I guess we could get into that. The dental professionals and dental scientists in particular have been really instrumental in the design and experimentation of Instafloss for the last 5 years. I didn't do all the engineering myself. I had them really inform the process. And so I had them write in to the Mayo Clinic essentially saying, what is this? This is absolute garbage. And to their credit, the Mayo Clinic, they didn't respond, but without letting us know, they swapped out the article. They kept
They made you actively check every day to see if it changed.
Exactly. So they switched. But the thing is, now there's already all sorts of stuff on the internet that are quoting WebMD, and WebMD is quoting the Mayo Clinic of an article that doesn't exist anymore. So
it's got a broken link now. So it's their Google, I guess SEO. It's going to go way downhill from having a broken backlink at this point. It'll eventually get a bad whatever, I don't know, the word, like ranking score for the website from having that now.
But the thing is that information has scattered to the wind. I mean, there's no way I can go and find every single website that has
no. It takes time, but eventually it kind of gets sorted out now because the original source has been updated. So, yeah. Anyways,
I hope so. Anyway, so that's
okay. So no, that's smart on how you chose
water.
The cleaning mechanism. You checked with water, and you got dentist input on the best way to do it. So we are kind of running low on time here, so I need to we kind of need to move it along. But let's get into like maybe just a couple of the prototypes, like because I've seen the products. Let me find the website. Here it is. I've seen the video, and we'll link to that. But let me mute it. But yeah, it's shooting water basically from the front and the back of the tooth simultaneously. It's obviously got a pump built in. So was this sort of like the way you originally thought of it working, or is it quite a bit different now, like in this finished version?
Actually, completely different. So my initial concept actually was a mouth guard. I'm like, okay, you put in a mouth guard and then the jets go and they hit everything. Except there were
real quick interjection. I did develop. Well, I was just hired help doing the CAD work. But you ever heard of this company called Floss? They may have gone out of business, but they had this thing. It looked like torture to me, but it was the same idea of flossing really fast, but they were doing it using string, and you literally put a mouth guard in and bit down on it, and all the string was in a crazy like X pattern, and it would just go through all the teeth at once. But I never thought it would really work because I feel like it would just something would get stuck, but they had videos of them using it. The whole thing was like, you had to get your mouth scanned. It was very expensive to get made because you had to get your mouth 3D scanned so they could build the floss angles exactly right so that you could bite down on this thing and it would all line up and not bind up. But that was just a quick interjection of like, kind of like you were talking about, like stick something in your mouth, like a mouth guard, and have it like work kind of all at once.
Right. So actually, I do remember that. I didn't remember the name, but I remember the design. And that would just not work on a fundamental level because that's not how you floss with string. If you're to floss with string, you want to take it and you want to wrap it around the tooth to sort of hug it and scrape down in a C motion. That's how you scrape something off the tooth. The mouth guard design that they have is not scraping something off the tooth, that's just shoving something up. So that, if anything, that would just
it would probably dislodge some of the gunk in there. Like it'd be better than doing nothing. but I think it's
Right.
less effective than like just flossing with string normally.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, it
Yeah.
depends on, there's certainly a spectrum, right? If better than nothing is your litmus test, then I will, I will concede that that is something. And I'm not actually knocking better than nothing, because 70% of people do nothing most of the time. So if you could design something that was better than nothing and get them to do it, then you are actually making an improvement. However, that
Right.
wasn't our goal. Our goal was to do the best we could,
Right.
because if we're there anyway, I just wouldn't want to come out with a product that was like, well, we made a slight improvement. So yeah, so that's why I never liked the mouth guard string idea, because it wasn't the ideal. That's not how you're supposed to string floss. It would maybe get something and maybe cause damage in other places. So the first concept was a mouth guard for water flossing, where we would channel water into various places in the mouth. However, we ran into two issues. One, as you mentioned a little bit about the other mouth guards, is you would have to create something custom, and this would be very expensive. And if you're making something stupid expensive, then you're not really going to solve the problem for many people. And there's going to be, even if people have money, they just don't want to go through the effort of biting into a mold and shipping it to you and getting it back and doing all that stuff. Like, there's a lot of friction on the way to solving the problem. And the fact that people have to put an effort is kind of the problem here. So number one, it would be stupid expensive. The second thing is that we realized, from an engineering perspective, we would only be able to funnel the water jets to certain spots on the tooth. So we'd be able to get, let's say, in between the teeth. However, remember, one of the advantages of water flossing, and one of the reasons why it is more effective than string, is that it can clean underneath the gum line a full 360 degrees around the tooth. And so we would take something and we would make it way more expensive for way fewer benefits. And that just did not make sense at all. Like, why are you if you're gonna sell a $500 product or more, it should be more effective, not less. And so, we didn't think that would have been viable on multiple accounts. So eventually, the concept that we came up with was an H shape. The top of the U can fit over your top teeth, and the bottom of the U can fit over your bottom of your teeth, and it has a rotating inlet between the H, so the H can rotate 360. And what this does is enables you to go from one side of the mouth to the other, and it passes the front of gum line as well as the back gum line. So this way, the water jets coming from multiple sides are able to clean a full 360 degrees underneath the gum line, like water flossing is supposed to do.
Yeah. I'm watching the video again. How does it know when to rotate? Is there like a sensor in there?
No,
Because it rotates perfectly with the mouth, and I'm like, well, how does it know how much to turn as it's going?
so your teeth actually provide the track. So
Is there?
you use your hand.
Okay.
You use your hand and you just move it from one side to the other. I probably should have a video on the website of demonstrating this. We will certainly in the user guide, but this also makes it cheaper. We don't have to create sensors. We don't have to create mechanical wheels or anything like that. Is that you just drag it from one side to the other. Your teeth and gums themselves provide the track and enables it to provide 100% coverage and to aim the jets at 90 degrees, which is the most effective angle, which is very hard.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, I watched the video and like it's pivoting, but it's pivoting exactly right to keep it. Like, if I'm taking this thing and I'm literally transferring it along, like the angle shouldn't, like, the only way this is going to be able to rotate is if something was making it rotate, because basically the handle stays straight and the I guess the U shape rotates, right? The handle's basically staying straight out of the mouth.
Yeah, correct.
And the U shape is rotating, but it's rotating just like, I don't know how that's working. It's really interesting. I don't know.
So it's working because the gums move the U shape, right? Because you are dragging it along a track. It's like if you are pulling a train and the train has tracks.
Oh, so really the video should show it should actually stick up. So it sticks up past the teeth into the gums, and it has to physically touch the gums on either the front or the back to make the contact to allow it to rotate. It can't be in clearance on both sides. Okay. That makes sense.
And that's really difficult to show on a video. But
right. Well, maybe it does show it. It's it's a well, not from the one view, but okay, it's fine. I get it now.
Yeah, I mean,
I totally get it. I get it how it works now. Okay, that answers my question.
So yeah, so this moving along the track of your teeth and gums is able to provide 100% coverage, and it's able to do it at 90 degrees, which is the most effective angle. And that way you can have a perfect water floss in just 10 seconds and automatically. And that was the initial breakthrough concept. And that was the beginning of the 5-year journey to develop it.
Oh, wow. So, okay, yeah, 5 years you've been doing the engineering and everything behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it has its own self-contained water. You didn't want to have to rely on like plugging it in or something. That way, more portable when you could travel with it too. And you don't really need that much water. You're only doing it for 10 seconds, so it's probably like, I don't know what quantity, but it's like the amount you have in a cup, pretty much. Looking at the video,
it's a bit more than that. It's 600 milliliters. It depends on what pressure you do it. Honestly, the higher the pressure, the more water.
Right. Yeah.
Within those 10 seconds. But if you do it at max pressure, it will be just about 600 milliliters, which doesn't take that much time to fill up the tank from the sink in just a few seconds.
No. Right. Yeah. You just do it once a day, fill it up. Very cool. All right. Cool. Let's get towards wrapping up. I think we covered most of the most important topics. The how you came up with the idea, the marketing, the engineering. Anything else you want to add? But typically my last few questions is my number one tip for inventors. What do you got for me there?
Number one tip for inventors. I mean, it really depends on what domain you're going to invent in. So if you're like me and you're making consumer products, honestly, I think the number one tip is you've got to partner with people who know what you don't. It's going to be very, very difficult to go into a domain and come up with a product by yourself unless you are an expert on it. So, for example, when I had the concept for Instafloss, the partners I immediately sought out were dental scientists. So Dr. Ana Mascarenhas is one of our advisors who's been guiding us throughout the entire scientific process, because not only do you have to make prototypes, you have to demonstrate that the prototypes are actually flossing, which then causes you to reiterate your prototype.
So when you say partners, are you actually like recommending people like you say, hey, come in and I'll give you 20% of the company to like help me develop this thing? Or are you just talking more like you kind of just pay them for their time kind of thing? Or I guess it could be either way.
It could. There's an infinite amount of arrangements that could work, and that depends on a number of things. So if you have a ton of money, then yeah, just pay consultants. That could really work. If you don't have a bunch of money, then equity, if you can sell the dream. And if you can't sell the dream, what are you doing? So equity is probably the way to go there. But I do have, some words of warning. You don't want to give equity just to anyone, just because you thought they were smart, but they weren't really. You have to have some sort of clause where they do what you thought they were going to do, or they don't get the equity. A equity relationship lasts longer than the average marriage in the United States. So you want to be very careful about your equity partners, perhaps as careful, more careful than who you choose to marry. So, in my previous company, I had some engineers who were like, oh, we're the greatest engineers ever if you give us equity, and, we'll then, work really hard and do all these things. And it's like, well, I mean, luckily I didn't agree to it, but, in retrospect, the way that should be approached is, oh, you're such a great engineer that you can create it and it will work. Well, how about we sign a contract that if you do it and it's very specific, then you'll get your equity. So this is the difference between vested and unvested equity. Unvested equity is saying that you have the chance to get 20% under these conditions. And so if you are going the equity route, you want to be very careful about that. You don't want to have a snake oil salesman partner who will tell you that they're an expert on something and not deliver. And then, oh man, they have a third of your company and now you need to get someone else and give another third to them. And then they're wrong and so on. So yeah, that's a whole thing. Be careful, but you still,
I'm kind of curious how you convinced these dentists. You probably had, because like you're asking them to basically work for free and provide, I don't know how much time of theirs is being put in, but it's like, hey, you go up to them and like, I want you to be a partner in this. And it's like, I'm not going to pay you anything, but you get equity. It's like, well, they have to be believed this is actually going to be worth something. And I guess, how did you convince them that it was worth something? Because you had no sales to back it up at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, so it's not just them, right? So it's the dentist, also my lead engineer, Dr. Ralph Roud, who is an expert on fluid mechanics. And because, I know a bit about certain products and, engineering them, but I am by no means a fluid mechanics guy. And so I really needed him to lead this development. He's, came on for the equity as well. So, it's not just convincing people in one discipline, but a disparate amount of disciplines, from, at least in my case, dentists and also engineers to work for equity. So I think that if you can't do this, you should really reconsider your dream here. If you're the only person who believes that this is going to be successful, maybe they're right and you're wrong. I'm not saying they are. Maybe they don't see what you do. Maybe you really do have an insight that no one else has and you should pursue it. But you should at least consider that possibility that other people are just as smart as you. So when I presented this to Dr. Anna Mascarenas, Dr. Mark Miguel, Dr. Ralph Roud, different kind of doctor, not a dentist doctor, they got it. They knew. And obviously I did supplement it because I had to show them the market data. Not everybody, knows that offhand. But upon seeing the fact that everybody has teeth, everybody ought to floss, nobody wants to, but they would if it was easy, and this is how we can do it, I think it becomes a no-brainer that is going to succeed.
And another important, and I'm assuming I'm probably right on this, but another important thing to realize with this is sort of like if you want to license your product,
mm-hmm.
you need to have at least a provisional patent. Because if these guys are in the industry and you give them all this data and an idea of how it's going to work, and you don't have a provisional patent, if they don't have any, ethics behind them, they might just take it and do it themselves. It's a possibility. You don't want to risk that. So, non-disclosure, I would say a provisional is probably a better idea.
I mean, a provisional is better than a non-disclosure. Granted is better than a provisional, and multiple granted is better than single granted. And especially with international priority is important. So yeah, I mean, just because you have a patent doesn't necessarily mean your patent is good. Definitely, I think it is 100% solid advice to make sure that one of the first things you do is hire a very competent IP lawyer. Like, don't even, like if you have an idea for something and you're like, oh, I can start engineering it and devoting my life to developing this, and then you find out that someone else has the patent for it, you've just wasted your time. The very first thing you need to do is search on Google Patents at the very minimum. And the second thing you need to do is hire a lawyer. Because, with Google Patents, you might find out you don't need to hire a lawyer because there's like 10 patents for the same thing. And you're like, okay, I already see that there's 10 patents. I don't need a lawyer to tell me that. But if you see that there are no patents, then you need to hire a lawyer and say, hey, I looked for it. I couldn't find anything. I think it's novel and inventive and unique, and I think they'll grant me a patent. And then you'll get their opinion. That is definitely one of the first steps you need to do. I would say probably the first step is make sure you have a viable idea. The second step is make sure that your viable idea is patentable. And then the third step is see if you can create a prototype that works. And then the fourth step is find the funding to get it to market. And obviously steps continue after that. The journey never ends, but as far as inventing, I think everything after then ceases to be inventing.
That's great advice. Really informative stuff today, Ellie. Last question. If people want to get in contact with you or your team, what's the best way? Email address, website, phone number?
Yeah, go to instafloss.com. There's a contact button and you can get through to us. Very involved. I'll see 99% of all emails. So yeah, write in. There's an email right there.
Cool. All right. Well, that is it for today. That was a good long episode, a bit longer than we typically do it, but good information. And we'll catch everyone next time.
Now a word from this week's sponsor, Onshape. Onshape is the only cloud-native product development platform featuring professional-grade CAD and data management. With Onshape, you no longer need an expensive workstation. All of the heavy lifting is done in the cloud. Things like rendering and creating large assemblies can be done on inexpensive devices. Onshape is a professional tool like SolidWorks. It was actually created by the same founders as SolidWorks. I have used Onshape and it feels just like SolidWorks with all the same commands. So if you're a current SolidWorks user, it's a very easy transition. I highly recommend all the engineers and product developers listening to consider Onshape for their business. You can try it for free at onshape.pro/engineering entrepreneur podcast or click the link in the description.